Well, welcome to the Brexit Party stream. I think we should begin with a song. Gentlemen, please be standing. When Britain first at heaven's command arose from out the azure main, arose from out of the azure main. This was the standard, the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. Happy Brexit, everybody. Now begins the stream. I apologise for the technical problems at the beginning. But I have to begin the questions today. Any questions on history, DNA, religion, those kind of things, the topics of the channel, I'll do my best to answer. Now, I already have a few sent in from my beloved patrons who keep the channel going and the reason that it exists. And so I will start with theirs. The first question comes from one H. Quinn. Due to the wolf hunting topic being brought up on Frog Twitter a couple of months ago, what's your opinion on fox hunting? Well, when I was a young lad, I was a sabber and I was against fox hunting. And actually in 2005, when it was banned by Tony Blair, I was out running across the fields of the English countryside, sabbing to try and prevent the first illegal hunt. As I got older, I matured and I realised that the history of this tradition goes right back to the Normans, who themselves take it from an ancient Indo-European custom. You can see it among the Persians and many others. It is the custom of hunting and sportsman hunting. I think it's very good. It promotes a great value system in mankind, a predatory nature, which is something I think should be promoted in young men. And also in specifically the English form of fox hunting, this very ancient tradition. It is an essential part of rural community. It brings life to rural communities. It unites all the different classes, the farmers, the landowners. Everyone is all working together to make the hunt work. It's a wonderful sight to see everyone, the red coats or the blue coats, the beautiful horses galloping across. They come right past my house. In fact, the hunts and all the lovely hounds. It's a wonderful occasion. And I think that the people who banned it are Marxists, subversives, urbanites, and bad people in general, and they shouldn't be allowed to tell people in the countryside how to live. That is it. His second question comes from Chris, who says, do you feel that ongoing pagan traditions, attitudes, and values played a greater part than biblical Christianity in forming the European Catholic civilization of the Middle Ages? Well, I think that the European civilization existed already, and European cultures existed already, which grew out of, the Indo-European cultures. So what the Catholic thing did was just add another layer on top of that. It's like saying industrial identity. The Europe existed before the Industrial Revolution, but the Industrial Revolution had a cultural effect on Europe as well, and that added on top of it. So Catholic, it wasn't ground zero with the introduction of Christianity, but it was a big shift, of course, religiously, and the Catholic religion has taken some aspects out of the preceding European civilization, and other things it changed. So the exact question is about values and traditions and attitudes. Well, a great deal changed, but I don't know how to quantify it. So when you say which is more or the other, I don't really like those kind of questions, because if you quantify something that doesn't have measurable quantity, it doesn't really mean anything. But I think you get the impression. I've said that they both obviously have a role to play, so I don't think that you get anything of value saying one or the other. Corbin Bishop says, what do you think about the theory that the Hungarians descend from the Scythians? Well, it is true that everyone in Eastern Europe probably has some Scythian DNA. Having a lovely cup of tea tonight because I'm on the wagon, not drinking for all of January, and it's only one day left, but still I have to uphold the oath. All Eastern Europeans have some Scythian DNA, inevitably, because the Scythians lived in Eastern Europe. However, it's not true to say that the Hungarians as a race come from the Scythians, because the Hungarians are not really... It's possible the original Huns were a Scythian people. I'm not really sure. They could very well not be Scythian. By Scythian, I mean an East Iranic-speaking people. The term Scythian was used by the Romans quite willy-nilly to describe all different peoples who lived on the steppe that probably weren't that closely related in truth. But if we use the term properly now, Scythian means East Iranic language speakers, and it's possible the Huns were, we don't really know. But certainly modern Hungarian is not Scythian. And what's more, the people who came in would have had some Asian DNA, and modern Hungarians don't have any Asian DNA. They're pretty much the same as their surrounding Slavic and Germanic neighbours, so they've got a lot of integration from Slavic and Germanic people. Just make sure everything's going all right over there. Do you agree to the notion that there... No. Wait, I'll come to my super chat. I've got a super chat here from Horatio Nelson. Horatio. Base intro, adding to my Patreon contribution. Thank you very much, Horatio. Much appreciated. Thank you for the donation. Now, what am I up to now? Well, I have to continue the Patreon ones. I've got two more. Here's a tricky one from Joseph Matthews. Do you think a popular revival of belief and understanding of our pre-Christian gods is likely or even desirable? Completely different questions. Likely, I don't know. Maybe statistically, I mean, it is a popular revival. There already is a popular revival. By definition, there are literally thousands of people who identify as pagan. So that's. But do you mean like is it going to be the majority religion? No, that's not likely. Is it desirable? Absolutely, yes. But it doesn't mean it's likely. Quite different questions, unrelated. It's desirable because, in my opinion, the gods are real. So why would I not say it was desirable? It's peculiar. I mean, Joseph has been a supporter for a long time, so I don't know why he would ask that. It's quite evident that it's a pagan channel. Access to an understanding of the remaining pagan corpus requires a lot of time spent discovering which texts to read and how to interpret them. No more so than a monk or a priest would require to study the Bible. And only someone at that level. Not normal pagans aren't supposed to be studious and studying all this sort of thing. I've said this before. All you do to be a pagan is you perform the necessary rites. The actual secrets and the esoteric level of knowledge was always reserved for a high caste to preserve that wisdom. It wasn't for the common folk. And the idea that everyone should have an equal access to it is from Protestantism. It's not even Christian, it's specifically a Protestant idea. And I suppose it also exists to some extent in Islam, but it's not a pagan idea at all. So that's not of course, the Druids had to do 20 years of study before they could be a Druid. And I mean, if we said today to call yourself a pagan priest, you should do at least, some 10 years of study or so first. I think that's reasonable. It's less than what the Druids had, but obviously you should know all this stuff inside out if you're going to call yourself a religious leader. But if you're not a religious leader, you're just a normal person practicing, all you need to do is know the names, how to invoke your god and how to properly pray to them in the correct way, and that can be taught to you by someone who has taken the necessary steps to become an expert in the religion and a religious leader. Will there ever be a pagan religious texts? Or due to the current lack of one, is it instead better that the information is delivered orally from those learned men that have read existing source materials themselves? There are already many pagan texts, because many pagans write texts. And there are also many, as I've said, there are pagans write stuff all the time, and also academics write all kinds of stuff about paganism. Plus we have the ancient texts as well from the Neoplatonists, the Rig Veda, all these ancient Indo-European texts, and some of them which are also recorded by Christians, like the Edda and stuff like that. None of these texts are in India they regard the Rig Veda as holy, but the idea of holy books didn't really exist it didn't exist at all in Europe. There was never a holy book to in European religion. Any religion in Europe had a holy book. I mean, the closest you could say to it would be the Chaldean oracles to the Neoplatonists. But then you can even question to what extent the Chaldean oracles are European, of course. But yeah, it's certainly not a European tradition to have holy texts. We have books where we write about holy matters, but those are of course, not to be worshipped like a Bible or a Quran should be. I think I've answered that to the best of my ability. Now let's go to the super chat. Smile Titans. Hi Christopher. Congrats on Brexit. However, I heard the English may lose tech like the sandwich. True? Also, Atlantis. Fact or fiction? We may lose the sandwich. I guess there's a lot of scaremongering about Brexit. I don't want to go into that, but yeah, it's very silly. Atlantis, I don't believe in a massive continent called Atlantis, but I do believe that the story, that the ancient story in Greece was possibly related to certain historical events, but or interactions with people in the West, who's, there might have been an island in the Western Mediterranean that had some problems with climate change or rising sea levels or something like that. But actually, I don't think that it serves primarily as a historic document, but as a moral instruction about the impermanence of things, about how even the great cities can fall. And that's something that is a valuable lesson that the ancient Greeks thought they should remember, and it's also one we should remember too. Hope that's helpful for you. And thank you for your donation. From Pete, we have 10 Canadian dollars. Thank you very much, Pete. What is your opinion of Wilhelm Grunberg's Culture of the Teutons? I haven't read it. Sorry, I can't answer the question. Could Atlantis not be Doggerland, says Jive and the Terrible? Absolutely not in any possible way, because one, Doggerland didn't have a civilization. It was populated by Western hunter-gatherers who had mud huts at best and bits of rocks that they carved into sharp points to stick into rabbits and eat. They were cheddar men, basically. Also, there would be no living memory of Doggerland anyway. Even there wasn't a civilization there. There was just a few scattered hunter-gatherers. Doggerland was a swamp, and it was populated by Western hunter-gatherers. Western hunter-gatherers were almost entirely replaced by the Neolithic peoples, and then all of those were pretty much replaced in Northern Europe by the indo-europeans. And you're talking about a long time after that when the Greeks start recording stuff about Atlantis. So it's just completely implausible that even bring up Doggerland is just don't do that, please. It's just not relevant. Forrest Evans, $5. Can you explain backbreeding? I don't know what that word means. If not in depth, please in depth in a separate video. Thank you for your unique content. Anthropology is... sorry, Forrest Evans, a cool name, but I can't help you there. I don't know what backbreeding is. Is that when you rebreed... that's when you try and breed like a cow that's been extinct by breeding other cows that look like it. Yeah, it's basically like... If there's an ancient breed of cow, you know how it looks, and you find some different cows that look a bit like it and might be descended from it, and try and recreate that phenotype by reverse breeding to something that looks like that cow. That's about all there is to it. Yeah. Okay. One more question from my patrons as well. Do you have an opinion on the practice of human sacrifice in the history of Germanic paganism? And was this phased out over time, or remain a feature essentially until the conversation of Iceland? Okay, I'm going to think he means conversion rather than conversation. It must be predictive text or something. Well, I do have an opinion, yes. All Indo-European religions had in their base a tradition of human sacrifice. That was something that must have gone right back. And not only Indo-European religions, but most religions had that. Whether you look at the Maya or the Semitic peoples like the Carthaginians, ancient people in ancient times, in the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age, human sacrifice was a pretty common thing in most religions. In Indo-European religions, what we see again and again is a kind of clever sort of twisting of the theology surrounding human sacrifice to get around it, because the people who did it didn't want to do it. And actually, the Indo-European relationship with the gods isn't one of, obedience all the time. It's okay if you can trick the gods and get what you want out of them. It's kind of it's not bad necessarily, as long as you're not being blasphemous. So in Rome, they come up with this. Numa comes up with there's a story about how Numa usually there's only one god in every pantheon who actually wants human sacrifice, and the others don't. But in Rome, it was Jupiter originally who wanted human blood, and they tricked him and just said, I've talked about this in another stream already, but I'll do it. I'll just go over it again for turfing. It's like he says, I'll give you fish instead of blood, and like, I need some man, and they give him a bit of hair or something. It's a trick, and I think what happened with the Germanic people is that they got around it from. I mean, in Ireland, we know that they used to kill kings. They had to kill their kings. If the king was bad, they would sacrifice the king. But it seems that something similar happened in Nordic people as well. But I think they sort of moved it to a new mode where they would instead only sacrifice criminals. So originally they wouldn't have just used it as a cynical way of getting rid of criminals. They would have just killed them. But eventually, I think they just thought like, okay, well, the god Odin demands blood. None of the other gods demanded human sacrifice, but Odin does, and so let's just give him the criminals that we don't want anyway. So it kind of evolved that way, and eventually most the Romans, by the time they're starting to encounter like people and write about the Celts and the Germans, they're surprised that they still practice human sacrifice, because the Romans got rid of it a long time ago, and they start to see it as something backwards. And it's the same thing like the Hindus, like they not only got rid of all blood sacrifices. The Vedic religion was very bloody, cattle sacrifice, horse sacrifices, and they just generally like come up with theological justifications for not doing it, and then deny. In the case of India, deny it ever happened in the first place. But in other religions, they don't deny it. But yeah, you can see there's a general trend in all Indo-European religions where there was a Proto-Indo-European tradition of human sacrifice, and they try to get rid of it. Or just neutralize it, or find a way to accommodate it socially that doesn't require them to give up their loved ones as offerings to the gods. Callan Hoy says, "Sup, brother? Do you miss Thulian Perspective?" No, I don't. I didn't watch it. He started going just crazy talk, and I just didn't watch it for a long time. So that's all the questions from the patrons done in the first 15 minutes, and also a few of the super chats. Don't be shy, keep them coming. The modern hermeticists, can you speak about the time placenta? I don't know what that is, some kind of joke about Varg, I guess. Well, that's my my ale for Brexit night. Bit of water. I've got a new setup, by the way. I'm downstairs now. I've moved my office downstairs, and I've got a nicer big desk, and that's meant I can position the camera directly at my face instead of up from the side like it used to be. And I put two lights either side, and I've got my bookcase behind me. You can't really see it, it's so dark in here. But I put a little candle out so you can have a bit of light. Oh, here's another super chat. What do you have to say? Chad Martin, $5. Thank you very much, Chad. What is the best source to use in debunking the out of Africa theory? Well, if you actually... The out of Africa theory, I've explained this in detail in the talk I did on the history of Britain and her people, and in other places. There's some confusion about what out of Africa theory means. What was called the out of Africa theory in 2009 has been debunked, and all scientists already say that isn't true. There's no scientist who'll say that theory is true. But what some people think that means is that we don't descend from a migration out of Africa. We absolutely do. We do descend from a migration out of Africa. There's no way to debunk that, because that's quite evidently the case from genetics. We can see that. What's not true is what was said in 2009 was that all mankind is descended from one group of Africans about 50,000 years ago and then dispersed out, and that we've all just come from that. That's not true at all. All the people who are not sub-Saharan Africans do descend from a migration out of Africa somewhere between 50 and 70, maybe 80,000 years ago. And those people who left Africa then also interbred with other species as well to give us even more diversity and were more genetically distinct from sub-Saharan Africans as a result of that interbreeding with at least, I think, 3 other species. 2 we've named, Denisovans in Asia and Neanderthals in Europe. But there's also evidence of some other species that are present in Papuan and Aboriginal Australian DNA. And that will become more known about in future when more genetic samples come. But as for the Africans, it wasn't the case that the ones that left stayed, and then the ones that left became Asians and white people, and the ones that stayed become all the black people. Not at all. That population that left Africa was from a race that doesn't exist anymore. And the races of there's no such thing as a black race, by the way. Like the black you could divide the human race into 2 races if you wanted: black people and non-black people. Because really, if you want to talk about races, there are many black races. The white race is just one small part of Eurasia. So you could say there are Eurasian races and there are African races. And one of the Eurasian races is the white race. But the black races, there are many black races. And they have enormous amounts of genetic diversity because they don't all descend from one group of people 50,000 years ago. In fact, the last common human ancestral population to all the races of black and non-black peoples in the world now is at least 300,000 years ago in Africa. But that's not the whole story, because also what we're finding in recent papers is that the African populations inside Africa also interbred with other species that were divergent from human lineages millions of years ago. So they're probably ancestral to Neanderthals, and then some of them left Africa and evolved into Neanderthals inside Europe. So something very, very archaic has been found in the gene pools of some sub-Saharan African races. There's a lot of diversity, so it's a complicated picture. But the idea, when you want to debunk the out of Africa hypothesis, that means you can debunk the idea that we all come from one group of Africans 50,000 years ago. That's been debunked, and no scientist will say that anymore. But no one plausible has said that humans from outside of Africa don't have descent from most of their descent from a migration out of Africa in the last 100,000 years. That's pretty much established from haplogroups and other evidence. I hope that answers your question, Chad. Jarrett Rushing, $10. Is there a thank you very much, Jarrett, for that $10. Is there a conflict, BN, Gunon's perennialism and your paganism's use of perennialism, since Gunon didn't see Christianity or Islam as lunar or aristocratic? Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, Gunon didn't believe you could be a pagan. So, of course, you can't be a Gunonian and a pagan. But if you read Evola, I'm very much against these Gunonians. Evola talks about these pathetic types of people who look at Gunon as a prophet and his word is gospel. This is the whole thing that Evola was trying to move away from. The traditionalist school is interesting, and it was very influential on Julius Evola. My interest in the traditionalist school comes through Julius Evola, who went far beyond it and was far more a man of action than Gunon. Gunon's views, he ended up becoming a Muslim and living in Egypt and marrying an Egyptian. Hardly a useful an instructive lifestyle for modern people to go by. He makes some very good criticisms of the modern world, but of modern religion. He didn't think ultimately that Christianity. He thought that Christianity was compromised, which is why he became a Sufi Muslim instead. I can agree with him. I think Christianity has been compromised, and even more so since his time in the 1920s. Since Vatican II, it's become much worse. But no, I wouldn't go and become a Sufi. His reasoning, he was very interested in, his first book was on Hinduism, but he didn't think he should become a Hindu because his opinion is that Islam is the closest religion to European spirituality after Christianity. But I don't agree with that. I would say that paganism obviously could be revived, and that also his views on what paganism was were very crude. If you read his writings on Celtic stuff, he doesn't know a clue. He hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. He doesn't know what Indo-European religion is. He doesn't know anything about Hinduism either. He denied the Aryan invasion even happened. He didn't know a lot of the time. He just talks nonsense, to be honest. So I'm not a Gunonian. I'm certainly not worried about having conflicting beliefs with René Gunon. Nate the Ape, $4. Thank you, Nate. Do you think Europe will continue on its path of secularism, or will it begin to turn back towards religious piety? I don't know. I mean, some people in religion it will remain pious and will seek religion because that is the nature of man to do so, to look for answers and to see beyond the veil, so to speak. But as for the governments and things, if you're thinking if theocracy will manifest in Europe, I don't see it coming anytime soon. I see increasing the rise of technology and people becoming more and more atomized and alienated from their work and from their surroundings and from the people around them by technology, and that they will increasingly find it hard to identify sincerely with any religious belief as a result of the cultural milieu into which they have been habituated by, the institutions of socialization that they're subjected to. Jared. Oh, sorry, I've had just Jared one already. I get confused with the odd things. Do you have... Oh, this one's from Voltaire the Royalist. Ah, a royalist. Nice. $5. Thank you, Voltaire. Do you have a favourite fairy tale? Do you have a favourite forest in Europe? How would you describe the gods in Germanic polytheism? I'm not a folklorist. I never describe myself as one, and I don't study folklore. I listen to it as a hobby, and I take some interest in it. But my main reason for doing so is to try to find evidence of enduring paganism. I also do it just for fun, but I mean, I'm not a folklorist, and I don't know about my favourite fairy tale or folk tale. I don't normally categorise things into favourites, so like that, because they usually, I look at them as sort of tools for understanding, so I wouldn't classify them into that kind of order. My favourite forest in Europe? Well, my favourite nature in Europe is Britain, and I think probably... I mean, the favourite forest in Britain would be the New Forest, which is not an ancient forest, but it is a natural oak native forest, which was planted by the Navy in part because we needed more oaks to build ships. But after they didn't need it, then they let the oaks grow, and you have a beautiful oak forest. Hence, it's called the New Forest. It's beautiful, really, really beautiful. But it's not my favourite park, probably. I prefer the moorlands, like. I love Dartmoor, and I love Exmoor, and I love the Lake District. So those are really wonderful places. Oh, I hope that answers your question, Voltaire. Callan Hoy. Did you... €2, sorry. Did you enjoy a trip to Ireland? Gamers rise up. Yes, I did, thank you. I had a good time. Well, I did at first, and I met some really cool Irish people, but then I got really, really sick. Horribly sick with this virus that was all the symptoms of corona virus. I'm not joking. It was like a respiratory infection, and my chest was really bad. It took me good 2 weeks to get over, and the first couple of days I was when I got sick, I couldn't even get out of bed. I was unconscious for most of the day in my Airbnb, so I didn't get to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do, and even some of the stuff I did get to do, I was really pushing myself to get out the house and do it, and it was I was exhausted and just dragging my heels the whole time. I couldn't handle it, so it was a really nasty illness, and that was unfortunate. I don't know what it was. I thought it was flu, but whatever. Gordon Carl, $10. Received your book, The Spirit of Yule, yesterday and read it to my kids last night. Great. The look on their faces throughout was priceless. Thank you, sir. Oh, well, thank you too, sir. I'm really glad you liked it, Gordon. I've also have another friend who bought a copy, and he is a teacher, and he said he read it to the children in the school, and they all were fascinated to learn that they had roots that went further back than just their grandparents, that they had roots in such a deep history of the island and in these ancient pagan customs, and they, that's the kind of thing that sets their imaginations on fire and really lets them to know who they are. So I highly recommend anyone with children to buy a copy of my book, The Spirit of Yule, available on smiletitans.com, beautifully illustrated by the artist Christopher Steininger. It's a Christmas themed book, but get in the presents. I've got a son on the way, and I will certainly be reading it to him when he is born. So, Survive the Jive survives coronavirus. I don't know if it was coronavirus. It could have been the flu, because there was a really, really nasty flu going around Dublin at the time I was there. And it was in the news and stuff, like you turn the radio on and they were talking about how hospitals had to close, not allow visitors in because this flu was going around. So it could have been that flu. However, the day I caught it, I went to Newgrange on a tourist bus full of people from the far corners of the earth, shall we say. And that was at the beginning of January. So I don't know. It's possible I had corona. I don't know. But it could have just been a really nasty flu. Voltaire, is SJ going to be a father? Yes, I am going to be a father. My bloody phone's making noises. Where did you go in Ireland? Asks Mail. What's your take on Dublin being founded by the Norse? Well, both of those questions will be answered in an upcoming video, which I have been working on, about the history of Ireland, which will cover the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, the arrival of the Beaker folk, the Iron Age and the arrival of the Celts, the Viking Age and the founding of Dublin, and then also a bit of folklore on and some family history because I visited a castle that my family used to live in. And I got some ghost stories from the local people, the records of the local people who said that the ghosts of my ancestors would haunt that region. So I'll just read those. So all that will be in an upcoming video. So I hope you'll all enjoy them. Some Whiteso says, where do gremlins fall into in folklore? Gremlins come from the Second or maybe the First World War, but definitely the Second World War. It's American folklore. It's belief that the little creatures were sabotaging the airplanes and tanks and things, and popularized by the Hollywood film and the Warner Brothers cartoon. Not really. I guess it's folklore. Technically, anything that people believe is folklore. Howard Fass. $2 donation. Thank you for all the great content, and thank you for your donation, Howard. Much appreciated. Well, any more questions? Did I miss a super chat? Okay, I'll just go and check all the super chats to see which ones I missed. Sometimes they come too quick. It's a design flaw. Do you have a favorite? Do you think Europe will... Adrian Pereda, €5. Could you speak about Orphism and the idea of reincarnation among non-Aryan Indo-European peoples? Well, I've already talked about non-Iranic, ideas of... non-Indo-Iranic ideas of reincarnation among the Norse in the Halloween and the Celts in my other videos. So I don't really want to go over it again. The Celtic video recently I talked about it. There's evidence of that. If you watch the Celtic video, you'll see I talk about that also there. But I also think it was in the Halloween video where I talk about Alfarblot, the Nordic part, where I describe how Germanic people believed in souls coming back. And also I talked about a form of Germanic migration of souls in the reincarnation video, so you can see it there. As for the Slavs, I talked about their beliefs in reincarnation in the Slavic paganism video. So rather than go over all of those again, they're all in those videos there. As for the Orphism, I do not consider it a normal branch of Indo-European religion. It's divergent. It has its own unique divergent qualities, and it reminds me of Buddhism in some ways. And Buddhism is itself divergent in some. It's divergent from Aryan religion that he was rebelling against the Brahmins and things, making his own thing. So I see Orphism as a bit like a Buddhism of the West. It also, I think, it supported vegetarianism, didn't it? And that kind of thing. I am against vegetarianism. I think you should eat meat. It's good for you, make you strong. Hope that helps anyway. L Monk, £5 donation, thank you very much. Didn't Vikings also sacrifice slaves during funerals, such as in Ibn Fadlan's account? What would your ideal funeral be like as a pagan? Yes, Ibn Fadlan records that the slave was sacrificed after she attended her master. And there is some parallel perhaps with the account about 1,000 years earlier by Tacitus, who spoke of how the attendants of the idol of the earth mother Nerthus, having washed the idol in the waters, would then be drowned in there. It seems like, they have a specific role to play in a ritual, and then having played that role, they're killed. And similarly, the slave girl that Ibn Fadlan talks about is ritually raped by the thanes or the comitatus of her master before she is killed. But there's nothing to say that it was not voluntary, because she takes some kind of, I can't remember, it says she takes some substance or something. She becomes voluntarily intoxicated and she participates in the ritual voluntarily. So we can't really trust this Muslim 100% on his accuracy of the account, nor can we trust Tacitus on his accuracy, but we can both presume that they are speaking mostly the truth about whatever it is that they saw in the case of Ibn Fadlan, or heard about in the case of Tacitus. So yes, they did do that. You had another question. What would my ideal funeral be like as a pagan? Or if I would very much like to have a burial mound, if that was possible. But it might not be. You never know. But pagans had quite diverse types of funerals not only over the span of history, but also even within any specific time. Burial mounds and interment can occur simultaneously with cremations and urns, and then the burials of urns. And you can find sometimes people make a barrow just for one person, and then it's left just for them for a few hundred years, and then suddenly people start digging it up and putting urns in it and adding them to the same burial. It's quite flexible, I think. Might be surprised about it. Maybe a bit almost like today, because we are quite flexible in what we do now with our burial customs. There are set things you expect to see at a funeral, but there's also unique things that happen sometimes due to convenience or because of the beliefs of the deceased. So likewise, they would have had taboos that were set and traditions that were set, but also they were probably changing things according to other aspects. So in our case, I definitely don't believe in playing fancy dress or having a ship built or anything when you don't use a ship. Or if you do use a ship, then you should use the type of ship, be buried in the type of ship that you use, and not a replica 8th century clinker built wooden ship. That doesn't fit in with what I see paganism as. It should be a living religion. I certainly don't agree with this like fancy dress stuff. I mean, I like living history and stuff when people try to live out historical stuff accurately. That's great, but I'm just saying it was pagan religion. It's got nothing to do with that. Do you have what? Have I got all this? Got that. Oh, one was deleted. Oh, I think I got them all then. Well, £2 half Q pay per question, is it? Ah, you see what you've done there? You've just paid for your question. Well, I see the super chats. You might have asked another question, but if I don't see it, then I can't answer it. I'm looking at the super chats first. So, I mean, if you put a couple of questions in one super chat, I can try and answer both of them. 100 UYU. I don't know what currency UYU is, but thank you for that. That could be an enormous amount for all I know, or very little. I don't know what that is. But thank you in any case, Saifoyo, who says, thanks for the great content and congrats on the new boy, Tom. Cheers from a very Indo-European Uruguayan. Okay, so it's Uruguayan currency. Okay. Gracias. Muchas gracias. Jarrett Rushing, what are your thoughts on the afterlife? I'm going to finish this stream in 5 minutes. I can't answer that question. What are my thoughts on the afterlife? I did a dissertation. It's about 10,000 years, 10,000 words long, which covers just my thought on the use of horses in the afterlife. As for the whole thing, see my reincarnation video where I talk a great deal about the migration of souls and the tripartite soul of Indo-European spirituality for about an hour, and I think you'll get a better. You'll get more out of that than you would out of anything I can say in the next few minutes. I believe in an afterlife, and I also believe in the transmigration of souls. I believe they're two different things. Because the soul, I don't believe that the human, in the idea that we're one body with one soul. Rather, we're a composite of many different entities coming together. The daimons, as the Greeks say. We are animated by multiple entities, and the word soul is actually, although it's a Germanic word from Old English, it isn't used in any pagan context. So it started to be used only after Christianity was introduced. So it may have had a previous meaning in paganism that we don't know about, but certainly wasn't used in any cognate of it used in that we know about to describe the things that I use the word soul to describe when I'm talking about pagan religion, because actually that concept is a bit different to what pagans believed in. But yeah, watch my video called Reincarnation and the Tripartite Indo-European Soul to get an idea of what I think of the afterlife, please. Belda Koch, can you recommend a DNA test? I don't know the line of my father further than the grandfather. Or are they all a waste of money? Well, Beda, it doesn't really make much difference now. They're all pretty fine. The living DNA has used to have the best breakdown for people of British and Irish ancestry to break that up. But I think that's the other one. The main two are Ancestry.com and 23andMe.com. And they both now have sub-regional breakdowns in Western European countries, so you're probably all right for that. If you are, depending on what your ancestry is, it would depend how I would answer, because different companies might have better sampling in different areas, but I mean, if most of the companies focus on people from the British Isles, because most of their customers are of the British Isles, because they're Americans who are always surprised to learn that their majority ancestry is British and Irish, but a lot of that British and Irish is actually British that they didn't realise. But yeah, it doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. There was one company, I think it was FTDNA, that was in a scandal for releasing information, making it public and selling it on to third parties. However, even that company that did that did give you the option not to have that happen. All the other companies make you opt in. If you want to have the stuff sold, if they're going to sell it to third parties, you have to click opt in. But FTDNA had the same option, but you had to click opt out, and that's why it was a scandal. So don't believe everyone saying, oh, if you sign up to 23andMe, they sell all your data. They don't, unless you say you give them the permission to. You get to choose what they can do with your data. You can even tell them to immediately delete it as soon as you receive it if you want. But I don't know. Maybe you don't trust 23andMe. That's fine. There's not much difference in it. So Kirill Alesh says from 200 Czech somethings. Asked me about a tweet I said when I said there are people who think, right-wing people sometimes have misconceptions, thinking that the Achaemenid Empire was white, even though that ancient Iranians were white, but I don't think that's true. And he says, where can I find more information on this transition? Well, I'd say the easiest thing to do is just look up some blogs like Eurogenes and places. Eurogenes is a great genetics blog, or just look at a PCA, and you can see what the look on a PCA, look where the modern Europeans are, draw a circle around that. That's what you call white people, right? And then also look at some of the ancient populations that Europeans come from, like the Neolithic farmers and the steppe, the steppe Neolithic steppe and the Neolithic steppe, and the Bronze Age. What you'll see, and then the Bronze Age steppe. And what you'll see is that the Bronze Age steppe is closer to the modern. It's just inside the European block. It's white. But the Neolithic steppe is just a little bit away, because we all have, we're in between. There's the Neolithic Europeans and the Neolithic steppe. So we're in between because we've got that Neolithic steppe DNA and we've got the Neolithic European DNA, and it comes together to make Europeans. Well, Bronze Age steppe is the same, because not only did steppe people go west, but European Neolithic DNA went east onto the steppes too. So it's all what you call white people, and the Bronze Age and Iron Age steppe is Iranic people basically. So yeah, they were white. However, once in 700 BC approximately, when they invade Iran, they start immediately mixing with the people in Iran who have Chalcolithic Iranian DNA from Neolithic Iranian farmers, and we don't have that in Europe, so it's quite divergent from the European cluster. So it's about 300 years later when the Achaemenid Empire even starts. I don't think very, very many of them are going to be white. Some of them probably are. Some of them still might look white, might have white phenotypes like blonde hair and stuff, but that's going to go down and down and down throughout the Achaemenid Empire as they start to interbreed with all Middle Eastern people that they're invading and stuff like that. And it's just not really going to be likely that many people are white. Maybe some of the elites, I don't know. It's more likely to find that among the elites. Generally, we see that everywhere. Like in India today, there's more steppe DNA among the Brahmins than there are among the lower castes. So that's the same you can see in most places. So I'd say that would be the pattern to look for. Okay, I'm going to switch to the I've got some more to do. Okay, I'll quickly run through these because I've got to go switch to the private stream now, because it's that has to do some streaming for patrons only. So very quickly, do you think Sexnet is Ingwe? Probably not, no. Do you believe the Pictish religion and language would have been similar to Brythonic languages? Yes. What do genetics show about people from Pictish areas? Very same as the other people in the British Isles. Slightly more, Scotland today has more steppe DNA than other people in the British Isles, but that's just because of the north-south gradient. The nearer you are to France, the more DNA from France you get, and French people have more Neolithic DNA and less steppe DNA, so that's why. Thor's Tree, £10. Thank you very much indeed. Why do Irish people's DNA tests often show small percentages of Middle Eastern Semitic DNA? They don't. I've never seen that anywhere. I don't know what you're getting that from. I've looked at Irish DNA and it doesn't show any Semitic. You put it on you're probably seeing. Remember, anything on these commercial tests is not really that accurate. especially if it's less than 3%, just ignore it. If it's less than 3%, then it's just confound. It's called confounding. When you look at, if you take the DNA and look at it properly, there's certainly no Middle Eastern DNA in Ireland. There's not been an ancient migration of Middle Easterners to Ireland. If anyone's trying to push that theory, then it's just not true. More monarchy help restore Britain's traditions. I don't know what more monarchy means. Sorry, Chris, but thank you for the donation. But monarchy is good. Yes. From Peter Dick. Some tribute for our old chum. Thank you very much. 1,000 HUF. Is that a lot of money? I think it might be. I don't know. That Hungarian money, I think. Thank you very much. While we are on the subject of burial, what do you think? How closely related are the mounds and the Eastern Kurgans? Well, I think that all the burial mounds of the round barrow types that we see in Western Europe, whether it's Hallstatt culture, Bellbeaker culture, Anglo-Saxon, etc., they're all derived from the Indo-European steppe Kurgans. But the long barrows of the Neolithic are a completely different tradition. The chambered cairns, the passage tombs, these are a different tradition. I hope that answers your question, because mound means the same thing as kurgan to us in English. Barrow, mound, and these are all interchangeable words. Okay, everybody? If you want to see, I'm going to do more questions. I'll talk as much as I can until there's no more questions left. But now it's patrons only. I will only answer questions from patrons. You have to go sign up on Patreon or Subscribestar to be a supporter, and then you'll see the link to part 2. And also you'll get access to loads of private streams and stuff that I've done just for patrons, including a DNA 101 where I just give like the basics to everyone to get them up to speed on everything. And I did a history of Iberia stream, like all the genetics of Spain. I did a focused heathenism versus universalism heathenism stream. Loads of good stuff out there that you'll only get if you do that. And of course you get priority on AMAs in future. Okay, everyone, happy Brexit, and thanks